back to you, Dan. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So yeah, today is our Disability Vote California webinar on redistricting and representation. And on our slide, we have imagine the power of 4 million Californians with disabilities voting, with a backdrop of vote campaign buttons. We'd like to recognize our co-sponsors today. We have the ARC of California, the California State Council of Developmental Disabilities, Disability Rights California, and CFILC, the California Foundation for Independent Living Centers. Okay, next slide. So just give you a little rundown of what we're going to be presenting today. We have some background here on what is Disability Vote California, what is a district, what is redistricting, why does redistricting happen, how does redistricting impact us. Then we'll have a panel discussion on building relationships with your elected officials. Then we'll provide some background and reminders about the next steps in upcoming elections in California. And finally, we'll close with a session for Q&A, and then we will be done with our webinar. Okay. Next slide. So Disability Vote California. We are a coalition of various disability rights organizations across the state. And our mission is to engage and inform voters with disabilities and empower members of our community to facilitate access to voting for ourselves and our friends and our neighbors with disabilities. We are a nonpartisan campaign to eliminate barriers to voting, promote accessibility of voting technology and polling places, educating voters about issues and candidates, and promoting turnout of voters with disabilities across the state, engaging candidates in the media on disability issues, and protecting eligible voters' right to participate in elections. Thank you. Next slide. So today we're going to have a number of presentations. We're going to lead off with myself. I'll be talking about what is a district, and I am the public policy manager for CFILC. Our friend Andrew Turnbull will be presenting more details on the redistricting process. Andrew is a management consultant, journalist, and equine advocate. We also have Gabe Taylor, senior advocate, voting rights practice group at Disability Rights California. Rihanna Harden, self-advocacy coordinator, State Council of Developmental Disabilities, and Shay Robertson, systems change organizer for the Community Resources for Independent Living. Okay, next slide. So I will be talking about the fundamental question: what is a district? District is the geographic area that is represented by an elected legislative office holder. These are our state and local lawmakers. They actually, write the laws that go into our books, and their constituency is what you call a district. In California, we have congressional districts. Across the United States, there are 435 geographic areas from which members are elected to represent their communities in the U.S. House of Representatives. These are partialed out by population. So every 10 years when we do our U.S. Census, they take this population of the United States, divide by 435, and that tells you how many millions or hundreds of thousands of voters will be in each congressional district. Then they look at each state and they determine which states have gained or lost population over the course of the census, and then they allocate those seats by how many districts in each state. Locally or statewide, we have legislative districts, and these are the 120 geographic areas within the state of California from which state legislators are elected to represent in the Assembly, which has 80 seats, and in the Senate, 40 seats. These are all divvied up by population. So again, they take the population of the state of California, which is around 40 million, divide that by 40 for the Senate. So you get about 1 million constituents per Senate district, and half of that in each Assembly district. Okay, next slide. So this is the map of California, and it is featuring the proposed 52 districts, congressional districts in the state. As you can realize, in the state of California, populations are concentrated in the San Francisco Bay Area and in the LA, San Diego metropolitan areas. So as I mentioned, by dividing up by population, you have higher densities of districts in those metropolitan areas. Out in the rural parts of the state, those districts cover a lot more square miles. And that is California has used to have 53 congressional districts, but due to population shifts and a net loss of constituents in California, residents of California, we have lost a congressional seat, so we're down to 52. And the impact of that we'll discuss later, because that means a huge shuffle for candidates for that new seat or that loss of a seat. Next slide. In California, our larger body in the legislature is called the State Assembly. Members are called assembly members, and they have 80 districts, 80 assembly districts across the state. And again, these seats are in higher density areas in the San Francisco Bay Area in the north, and the Los Angeles and San Diego metropolitan areas in the south. Again, higher concentration of people means smaller geographic districts. More rural areas have larger districts. And let's go to the state Senate. Next slide. And here is a map of California's state Senate districts. There are 40 of them. And state Senate, they're all called senators, and they deal with double the size of a assembly district, so a larger area to cover. Unlike the U.S. Senate, the California State Senate is divided up by population, whereas the U.S. Senate is based on our founding fathers, the Constitution having 2 senators per U.S. state. Okay, next slide. We're going to now turn over to our next speakers, Andrew and Shay.
Wonderful. Can you guys hear me okay and see me? Hello? Let me make sure I'm muted.
I can hear you.
Okay, but how about my video? Can you see my video? I think I have to be promoted to a speaker, but it's okay. I don't need video. I can do this. So, oh, that's right. She's got the video. That's great. Okay. So, oh, my video seen. Thank you. I just hope I'm in it. I don't have any feedback. So anyway, wonderful. So what is redistricting? Well, redistricting is the redrawing of district boundaries. And this happens every 10 years, and it's as a result of the census. They take a census and literally count everybody every 10 years. And so it's really important that they find everybody and they count them, because that will determine, it will have a huge impact on how the lines are drawn. So let's start with over on the kind of left slide. You can see that each district is to have the same number of residents, plus or minus a small amount, because there's a little bit of error. But essentially, you divide for this particular case, we're going to have 4 equal districts. And we notice in each one of those, there happens to be 5 people, right? Well, over time, people move and things change and district sizes become uneven. Well, that means that the people in the district with 8 are going to be represented the same as the person with 4, or the little district with 4, blah blah blah, right? And so that's not a fair way to be represented. And so what happens is every 10 years they have to look at where everybody is, and then they redraw the lines. And so in this particular case, you can see they drew the lines a particular way to make sure that there were 6 people in each of the 4 districts. Okay, next slide, please. So on the left-hand side, one of the issues is that minorities in this particular case only make up a quarter of each one of the districts, and because they're divided. And so redistricting, depending on how those lines are drawn, can take away voting rights from the minority. And redistricting can also empower a minority to elect candidates of their own choice, because in each one of those districts, they get to elect a representative. In the case of the county, it's a county supervisor. In the case of a city, it might be the city council or mayor. And so redistricting can empower that minority to elect candidates that properly they probably represent their choices. Okay, next slide. So district lines can help our community's voices be heard by elected officials, or they can make it harder for us to be heard. District maps impact who makes decisions and who determines the resources. In our county alone, we have a huge amount of money because in Alameda County, California, there are 1.7 million people, which makes that county larger than 10 US states. And so when we divide up into approximately 330,000 people per district, how those districts are drawn is pretty important, because those elected officials can influence healthcare, education, housing, community service, transit, even fair wages, or even access to buildings or access to meetings. Or I know there's a bunch of laws that are intended to protect certain groups, but let's face it, it depends on who you're how you're represented. And so that becomes really important. So let me just check the next slide, because I want to know if this is a summary or if I got to come back. Okay. Yeah. So if you go back, that's okay. I'll finish up on this. It's super important that you answer the census. It's super important that you find out who's representing you. It's super important to know what districts you are in and who your elected officials are in those districts, because to the extent that you can influence them, you're going to have a better chance of having the resources allocated properly to support your way of life. Thank you for your respect and attention. I appreciate your time.
Andrew, and then we'll turn it back to Dan.
Great. Thank you very much, Andrew, for that presentation here. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right. We want to go move into our...
Dan, this is actually Helia. Can we pause for a moment?
Sure.
And if we could go back to the last slide, I think
Okay.
Shay was going to share with us a little bit about their experience with the redistricting process in their county.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Shay, are you with us? I think make sure she's unmuted. By the way, while we were waiting for Shay, she stepped up as a member representing this community. I'm sorry. I'm learning I'm 60 years old and I'm still learning to properly address people. So I'll say with they, them for her. But Shay was tremendous on the Alameda County Coalition for Fair Redistricting. She spoke up at the county meetings. She spoke up at the, thank you. They spoke up at the county meetings. They spoke up at the, in the organizing meetings. And we learned a lot about the issues of those with various disabilities as a result of Shay's benefit.
Thank
But
you,
I'll be
Andrew.
quiet.
Can you hear me?
Do you have her now? Do you have
Can
her?
you hear me?
Now we can. Perfect. Welcome, Shay.
Hi. I'm having computer technical difficulties. So hi, everyone. Thank you for your time and attention. My name is Shay Robertson. I am the systems change organizer at CREL, Community Resources for Independent Living in Hayward, Fremont, and Livermore. So my first assignment, essentially, at CREL as the system change organizer was to take over my executive director's seat on the Alameda County Coalition for Fair Redistricting, and I was taking over his seat and responsible for my voice being heard in terms of what we wanted our county to look like. And I'm just going to read you a little bit of the statement that I've presented on to countless Board of Supervisors meetings. So I pretty much said, CREL is a peer-based, self-identified disability organization that advocates and provides resources for people with disabilities to help improve lives and make communities fully accessible. Therefore, our community of interest is access and tools to create the opportunity to live an independent life throughout the county. With the help of county leaders and staff, people with disabilities increasingly enjoy independent living in the areas of accessible transportation, accessible housing, appropriate social services, and access to county buildings and businesses. We would like to be represented when it comes to removing barriers, such as curb cuts, providing detectable warnings, installing accessible pedestrian signals, and other access features. Though our community is not focused on particular lines on a particular map, we are especially concerned about the access to services and information. As perhaps the only minority that anyone can instantly join at any time, we ask that you consider the needs of Alameda County residents with disabilities as you work on the redistricting of Alameda County. So I pretty much said that statement several times and actually got a little win. So my community is not completely like disbanded or anything. And I really believe that if you want to be involved in the redistricting process as a person that may or may not be a member of the disability community, it is really important for us as a community to have our voices heard. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
I will pass it on to Dan.
Thank you very much, Shay, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this today.
Great. Thank you, Shay. Thank you, Andrew. And we will now move to our next part of the program. This will be building relationships with your elected officials. This is going to be a panel discussion, and I will be serving as the moderator. And I will be recognizing our panelists here. Benjamin McMullen, pronouns he, him, systems change advocate, Center for Independence for People with Disabilities. And Carrie Madden, she, her, systems change advocate, communities actively living independent and free. Colin Thompson, he, him, systems change advocate, disability services and legal center. And then Heidi Dago, her system change advocate, Dale McIntosh Center. And before I begin here, there is a question in the chat. And the question is, once redistricting has happened, is there a way to change it? How long does it take? We will bring that up in our Q&A section at the end of this panel. And so we'll promise I'll get to that. Okay, let's begin. Let's start off by getting to know our panelists. And we'll go around the panel here. Would you please tell us more about yourself, where you live, and where do you work? Let's start with Ben.
Thank you, Dan. My name's Ben McMahon. I live in San Francisco, California, but I am the systems change advocate at CID in San Mateo, California. I got my start. I grew up with cerebral palsy. I got my start in disability advocacy as an intern at United Cerebral Palsy, where I worked interfaced on Capitol Hill. Networked my way out here when I decided to move to California to join my family, and networked my way to CID, where I started as the systems change advocate.
Okay, terrific. Let's go to Carrie Madden.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carrie Madden, and I'm with CalLife in downtown Los Angeles. I live out here in Chatsworth. How I got my start, I'm a person with a disability. I have muscular dystrophy. It's a genetic disability, and there are 2 other siblings of mine that have the same disability. Also have a family history of dementia. 3 of our family members have died from it. So we also have numerous other disabilities. I won't get into them all, but all my life we've had a need for services, public services and such. And we've always had to struggle to find those services. And a lot of times people ask me, where do I go? How do I find the services that your family has? And that's really how I got started into advocacy. And then when I found out about the independent living centers, I said, that's where I want to be. That's where I want to work. So luckily for me, I got a position as systems change, and here I am today. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Let's go to Colin.
Hey everybody, my name is Colin Thompson. I am a system change advocate with Disability Services and Legal Center. I live and work in Santa Rosa. We're based in Summit County. We also provide services to Lake County, Mendocino County, Napa County. I got interested in this job. I graduated Summer State with a bachelor's of arts in political science, and wanted a job that would allow me to push for change and get involved in local and state government. That's a field I plan to pursue through my career.
Okay, thank you. And finally, let's go to Helia.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Heidi Dago. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the extremely proud systems change advocate at the Dale McIntosh Center. I live in Long Beach, California, but DMC is located in Anaheim and serves all of Orange County. So I'm right next door to the county that I work and serve in. I come from a long line of political activists on both sides, on all sides of my family. And I come to the independent living movement and disability justice space from mental health disability space. And I'm one of the people who we have some invisible disabilities. So while I'm not obviously apparently disabled by what I look like on the outside, I absolutely am. So that's kind of where I come to this work from, and specifically around voting and representation. My dad's side of the family is from the South, and I'm a Black woman. My family is Black. So voting is so important to me and my family, which is why I'm a part of Disability Vote California. I think that our right to vote is one of the most sacred and important that we have, and I will always fight to uphold that right. So thank you for having me here.
Great, thank you so much. Very exciting panel, a lot of great background here. Let's go to a kind of broad question here, because some people might have touched on it, but how did you get interested in this career? And I'm going to kind of talk briefly about mine. I didn't think I've introduced myself fully here, but I started out at CFILC about a year and a half ago as the public policy manager. But before that, I started out in state government in the California State Capitol. I was on the legislative branch there, working for a number of state assembly members, managing legislation and also communications. So got bit by the political bug a long time ago, but now at CFILC, I get to take those skills and focus them right on priorities for us, for people with disabilities in the independent living community, to make sure we are being heard in the state halls, in the state capitol halls. So thank you so much. So let's start with how did you get interested? How did you get interested in this career? And we'll kind of mix it up here. We'll start with Carrie.
Okay, so kind of went over it in my introduction. So I'll go into more specifically into voting and why I wanted to get active in voting. Because as a systems change advocate, we are so lucky because we get to hit in all different areas of our society and making them accessible. Well, my first experience voting, I was using a wheelchair. I rolled up to the Parks and Recreation facility, and there was a ramp so that I can get into the building, but the doors were locked. And my brother went in and said, come out, my sister's in a wheelchair, she needs to get in. And then I told the gentleman, I said, please unlock the door so I can get in. And he said, no, ma'am, those doors are to be locked. And I said, but I can't get up these stairs. And he says, sorry, those doors need to be locked. Luckily, I have a rebellious young brother. And he said, Carrie, go to the ramp. And so I rolled up to the ramp, and my brother ran into the building and opened the doors and said, come in. And so I got to vote that day. But I just imagine all the people that showed up in wheelchairs that day that didn't have a brother that was as adventurous as mine. And that meant a lot, you know, thinking that other people were going to have the same problem as I. In fact, my sister, who also had problems with stairs, she went to vote as well at that same place. And she had the same exact experiences I did, where the people would not let her up the ramp. So if it happens to me or my sister or everybody else, you know, somebody needs to stop this. Luckily, now there's the ADA, and I'm showing my age. It was prior to the ADA. But there are other access issues, and those are the issues I want to solve to make sure that everybody has equal access to voting like I do. Thank you.
Great.
Dan, this is Gabe. There's a question that came in the chat that seems sort of relevant, asking if any of you all have been yelled at or talked to sternly by any elected officials, or sergeant at arms in doing any of your work that you do.
Okay. Anyone want to take that on?
This is Helia. So not in my current role as systems change advocate, but before this role, I've always, as I said, been very politically active, and I have definitely been heckled, yelled at, talked sternly to by many different people, both elected and non-elected officials. And I appreciate the question. I think that anyone doing advocacy or activism work, I think it's important to know that that's always a possibility, and that your safety is really important. For me as someone who struggles and needs support around mental health, I always have a plan for myself. I noticed in the chat someone mentioned that it would be really difficult because you'd feel like you'd want to retaliate, and I 100% completely can empathize with that sentiment. I myself have felt that way many times, and for me, what's helpful is that I know that if I retaliate in any way, then that person is not going to receive my message. So for me, I always remember what I'm there for and what my message is about, and that is what is paramount. That's the most important thing for me at that time. So I don't know if any of my other colleagues have dealt with that, but that's how I deal with it. And yes, it does happen occasionally.
Okay, anybody else have had any experience where they've been targeted or spoken ill by elected officials? No? Okay, let's move on. Next question. Many of our attendees today, here in this panel, they're community organizers, work with people with disabilities, and we urge them to engage with elected officials to share their concerns and advocate for positive change. And can you tell me, why is forming a relationship with elected officials important? Because that's also a good thing. Once you get on their good side and you kind of become more familiar with them, hopefully they'll treat you nicely in public too. So who wants to start with that one?
I can start.
Yep.
It's important to have a relationship to make sure that you can have a voice at the table or in the discussion. Elected reps may not reach out to you or to your organization when doing outreach, and you also, there could be other minority groups or just other groups of people that may overshadow your voice. So having that relationship is important to make sure that your voice is heard and is taken seriously.
Okay, great.
And it also helps promote your disability organization if you work for one.
Okay. What I want to kind of bridge back to the beginning of our webinar on redistricting. There's going to be new relationships to make. We're going to have new elected officials in a lot of our districts that we traditionally thought were covered. So we have to really emphasize getting to know them, letting them know about our organizations, ourselves, and our issues and priorities. So there'll be some re-education going on, especially with the turnover due to term limits, but also when you start seeing your ballots, in the next few days, you'll see names you're not familiar with because your current legislator is now in a different district or member of Congress. So let's move on to maybe Ben. You can talk about what you do to form a relationship with elected officials and how that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. I always start with researching the elected official, even before I approach them for a meeting, learn what issues they support already, learn their stance on the issues, and see where you can form a partnership with elected officials, such as if they have legislation that's advantageous to people with disabilities, offer to support that legislation. And really just from there, build a dialogue whenever they have events in that area, maybe a town hall, attend the town hall, just anything can do to keep communication open and free flowing with elected officials is very advantageous with forming relationships and keeping them headed in the right direction.
Dan, can I add something?
Of course.
So this is Helia, and for me, I think it's really important to build a relationship with my elected officials when I don't need something from them, because I think so often elected officials are used to people, advocates, people like us coming to them and asking for something, usually money, right? We need funding for this. We need help with this. I need you to fix this. So it can be really, really helpful to build that relationship before the ask is there. So then when you have the ask, when you do need something, they already know your face, they know your name, they know who you are. So you're not only you're not only talking to them because you need something from them. They are people too. Yes, they are, you know, people whose job is to serve their constituents, and they're people. And I can imagine if the only time people ever talked to me was when they needed something, I might have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. So I have found that it works so much better just to have an introductory meeting. Just say, hi, this is me and this is what I care about. Can you tell me what's important to you as an elected official? To start the relationship. And then when you need something, then you can reach out again and say, hey, remember when we had this meeting? I loved that. Now I need something from you. Can you help me with this? So that's why I think it's really, really important to do that beforehand.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm gonna go to a slightly different angle on that. Is there any tips you use in forming a relationship with an elected official? Is it done by, do you prefer like a one-on-one meeting? Do you prefer, you know, catch them at a town hall, or how do you begin? How do you open that door to start that relationship? And let's go, and it's not just, and there's different ways to make those connections depending if they're a member of Congress or a state legislator or state senator. So Carrie, you want to talk about, you know, how you start those relationships?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of ways you can do it. Like Helia was saying, reaching out at before you're even asking for anything. So ways I've reached out is I'll mail out our literature, who we are, and ask at that time, hey, we're here in Los Angeles. I would love to have a meeting with you and discuss what we can offer you. Also, I've just called up the office and say, hey, this is our organization. I'm a Census Change advocate. Can I meet with you or your staff? And I've done it that way. Basically, I find it helpful to try to get that face-to-face time. That's the best way for me. That's how I communicate the best, because I can bring in the materials with me and I can show them our literature and stuff. So yeah, I do it through email. I'll do it through a phone call. I'll do it through the regular mail.
Great. And Colin?
Yeah, so the way I have fun with SHIP is I am on the Voters Choice Act committee, and I have a relationship with Register Voters, the head of that, and it's been really helpful. Just able to meet here through means, and I can reach out to her if I have questions on elections, and then when we'll just be able to provide a voice for people with disabilities, make sure that there's accessible vote, they have accessible voting options.
Great, thanks. Next question here. What do you do once you scheduled a meeting? What do you bring? What materials or talking points? What are some good features or handouts or connections that you like to make once you schedule that meeting? Let's go to Ben.
Yeah, I always try and bring a packet of what CID is about, the programs and services we provide, and in general, what an independent living center is all about as well. I also, again, research what I'm going to talk about, try and bring a fact sheet, leave 1 or 2 fact sheets about the top 2 or 3 things I'm going to talk about. So I have a leave behind. So the staff for the legislature, member of the legislature, has something to refer to, excuse me, even after I leave the meeting. And then always kind of follow up with a thank you note and a reminder of the meeting.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. Helia? Do you have any good handouts or good tactics when you actually have your meeting scheduled?
Yeah, I really liked what Ben said about giving some information around the community that you're a part of. So for us, all of us who are on the panel, we all work at independent living centers. So I usually bring some information around independent living centers, disability justice, because it's important that we not assume that the person we're talking to knows who we are, what we're talking about. We would hope that they would have, an understanding of disability justice, the ADA, independent living centers, but I'm sure that many of my colleagues on the panel can agree, and many of you in the audience can agree that when talking to people, you likely could be one of the first people who's ever said the words independent living center, disability justice, or even just the word disability to someone. Some people think it's a bad word or a scary word. So I like what Ben said about that. I think it's important to come prepared, do your research. And I think it's also great if you can offer your support to them in any way. So when you're doing your research, finding if there's any bills that they are carrying, that they are in support of, that they've authored, that you or your organization might be able to lend support to, if, of course, if it falls within things that, you agree with, morally, ethically, and legally. But that can be really helpful so that, again, it's not just you going and asking them for something. And then the idea of the leave behind packet, which I know Carrie is someone that has been telling us about that. It's such an important thing, a packet to leave, because during the meeting time, you're going to say a lot of stuff. They're probably only going to hear a little bit of it and remember maybe none of it. So that to have something to leave is great. And if the meeting is virtual, you can send the packet out ahead of time before the meeting for their reference. So then you can maybe, instead of spending time on education, you can spend time on talking about the issues. So I think, and you'll learn your elected officials. Every elected official is different. Some like really informative meetings. Some of them just kind of want to chit chat. It really depends. So you'll learn your elected official once you start forming that relationship, and you'll kind of find what works for you in that meeting time with them.
Mhm. That's great. I want to clarify that when we talk about meetings with our officials, we're talking about, meetings during their state time or their city time, or during their when they're in their congressional offices. It's more sensitive when you're talking to them as candidates in the election process. So in your day jobs, you might not be wise or permitted to engage with a political campaign office, etc. So we're talking about meetings with the state offices or the government offices that's of the office holder. But it's still very important to learn about the background of candidates on your personal time to figure out, are they even going to care about my issues? So this is like when you're before the ballots, before you vote, it's why sometimes you actually fire questions off to the campaign teams of these candidates to ask, what is your position on needs of people with disabilities, either in workforce or in education or in social services. So that's part of our responsibility as voters, is to get that secured during the campaign. And kind of tying back to redistricting again, because I'm always going to go back to that side of how we started this webinar today. Yeah, it's when someone is now in your new district, they might not know anything about your institution, or it's geographically part of their constituency. So that moment of introduction is always great. It's like, hi, my name is Dan Okenfuss. I live here in Sacramento. I just want to welcome you to our community here, and let me tell you about where I work. And I think that's going to be interesting when we get through this election cycle and we start seeing who our new elected officials are. So and that's going to be leading on to my next question, is from your perspective, what qualities make for a successful visit with your elected officials? You already had your meeting, you're done. Now it's time for the reminiscing and the reflecting on what you learned from the elected official, and what are you going to do to follow up? So let's go to Carrie and then Colin.
So for a successful meeting, once I've clarified why I'm there, and let's say I've shared stories or data, facts, then comes the hard part, the ask. And it's difficult because sometimes they don't want to commit to anything, but you kind of do need to find out, will you support us on such and such? And most of the time it's favorable. Luckily for us, I know that in other districts it's not so favorable, but in where I am in Los Angeles, most of the time it's quite favorable. So I usually get a positive response on that. But then after the meeting is over, then I usually the next morning I'm on my computer and I'm typing up thank yous, and I'll include any more additional documentation that they might have asked for during that meeting. Because a lot of times, even though you come well prepared, they'll say, I really don't know enough about this. And I'm always like, oh, I'll get you that information. So I want to be very timely in my response. So I usually get it out the next morning, what I promised. And then I'll even follow through maybe a week later with a second thank you. I hope you had time to read over what I sent you, and just try to get that commitment from that individual, and that will make it successful for me.
Great. Colin, what makes for a successful visit with your elected officials?
Similar to Carrie, I'll do have a whole bunch of research done beforehand. I'll type up the notes I want to go over. And then when I'm doing the ask, explain why, it's important for people with disabilities to have. And then, like Carrie, I'll send over any information they've asked for, information that I found helpful that I might have forgotten about during the meeting, and the show them as well, send a thank you and do follow up later on.
Okay, terrific. Next question here. What do you do when an elected official does something that goes against your values, but you have a relationship with them? How do you let them know that, Senator, that's not what we talked about, and that's kind of against or conflicts with some of the values of my organization? Ben, you have any experiences of that happening?
I do. With legislation that tried to erode the Americans with Disabilities Act, my congresswoman in San Mateo, Jackie Spear, was on that legislation. And I really tried to remind her of the good things she had done in the past and how she had supported the disability community and how harmful the legislation she was on would be to the disability community, and how it would kind of undermine things she had done in support of the disability community in the past, such as she had an anti-bullying bill at one time to prevent bullying against students with disabilities. And then when she came out in support of the ADA Education and Reform Act, I said, basically, this is counterintuitive to what you tried to do before, because it was geared towards stripping away the rights of people with disabilities and allowing businesses to have discriminatory practices against people with disabilities. So it's really just kind of sticking to your message, remind them of how maybe they've worked differently in the past, and also shining a light on why legislation they might be in support of now can be harmful to the disability community.
Great. One of the things I like to hold our elected officials accountable is their voting record. That's public record, and you can easily, you know, look that up. And if you see a member's vote on a certain bill in 1 year, it's always good to kind of send them a little reminder that if, say, that same issue comes up, to say, hey, Senator, just want to remind you that this bill's coming for a vote. You voted for it last year, and we hope you stay consistent to your word and to your record. So always good to put them on the spot. Or sometimes if you want to recall their conversation you had with them, then kind of bring up a correspondence or a phone call. And it's always good to say, you said that, and I got it right here. Helia, any experience in, you know, dealing with elected officials who might not go your way?
Yeah, a lot of a lot of it. I do serve Orange County, so a lot of experience with elected officials that don't, you know, we have a relationship with, but don't vote the way I would like them to vote. And I think going back to what Ben said, I think just like sticking to your guns, you know, and for me, I need to not take things personally. It's really easy to take things personally when there's legislation up that has very real personal ramifications for myself and my community. And if I take things personally, I'm not able to work with that elected official again in the future. And I think sticking to your guns, sticking to your values, and just being really clear and explaining your case for, you know, what Ben said, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I feel this way. And this is why I disagree with you. And then you can leave it at that. I think it's important to, you know, protect your time and energy. A lot of us do a lot of work all the time, and we can't allow someone that's not going to be swayed, you know, to rob us of all of our time and energy. So say your piece and then move on to the next fight, because there's always another one. But I think just sticking to your convictions is such an important thing in this, especially in this line of work and in, you know, advocacy and activism in general. Sticking to your guns and remembering why you do what you do is so important.
Great, thank you. Carrie, would like to add to that?
Yes, I've had a situation where one of my representatives was pushing a bill to make it mandatory that IHSS providers have a medical model of training. And it was coming out of her office that she was pushing this. And I had built up quite a good relationship with her over like 9 or 10 times. And I had to go in there and say, hey, this is not going to work. This is ruining the structure of the program. This is supposed to be recipient driven, where we teach our own, we train our own. Unfortunately, she really never backed down from that point of view, but I felt good. At least I got it, you know, our stories through, our point of view through, even if she didn't really take into account that it needed to be said. She needed to hear this. So, I mean, you're not going to always have a successful outcome, but the point is you have to try and hope things go well. If you don't try, nothing's going to change. But if you do try and fail, at least you did try.
Thank you. And Colin, why don't you close with your experience?
As Kara said, you may just not have succeed. You may have lost. And you may also, you know, have to rewrite your statement, argument on your position. Also, you know, maybe you can get another organization or committee to help you be a second voice, and that can help elevate your position. And if you have, you know, multiple representatives in your area, maybe go talk to someone else and see if you can get them on board.
Great. Okay, now is the part where we get to hear questions from our audience, and we have a Q&A function here, and the Zoom down at the bottom. Click the Q&A function, click the Q&A button. And then you can pose questions and we will assign people to answer. And so I really appreciate everyone's, all the panelists' time here, and we had some really rich discussions. And I wanted to close by, or not close, but I just wanted to mention that our ballots are coming out soon. The vote by mail ballots should be reaching our doorsteps in next week. And this is an opportunity for everyone to kind of like learn to see, learn about their new candidates if they have any. And let's allow some time here for people to pose some questions. Just to go over some current dates here, we have upcoming elections. The primary is going to be on June 7th. Then our general election will be November 8th. You can go to check out our website at disabilityvoteca.org for resources. And if you aren't already registered, there's still time to register to vote for this upcoming election. And you can go to registertovote.ca.gov. And while we're talking about today, I want to make sure that everyone, there's going to be a lot of social media posts about today's webinar on redistricting and voter outreach. And that will be using the hashtag DisabilityVoteCA on social media to talk about it. But let's, I still see some questions here. And I'm going to have Gabe and Rihanna also help field those questions. And we'll be helping our panel to answer them. Thank you.
Real quick, on that, you have until May 23rd to register to vote. So do it soon. It's coming quick.
Yeah, so this was actually a question that popped up earlier in the discussion. Sandra brought it up. She just was asking, once redistricting has happened, is there a way to change it? And how long does that process take? And I don't know if any of the folks on the panel could kind of talk a little bit about the process in a little bit more detail in terms of like the timing and how long folks have to wait in terms of like when things start getting initiated.
Shay, do you want to take that one?
I will take the first part. So it took quite a long time. I got this position in August in terms of community organizer, systems change organizer in August. And the lines were finally drawn in January. So it took a long time. And once it's done, it's done. You can't change it for another 10 years. So it's my advice that it's really important that if you have a need or a community interest that you really want to be seen within district lines, to make sure you do it as early as possible and to go to each one of your district supervisors meetings. Because I even went to, even though it wasn't my quote unquote district supervisor, I went to all 5 district supervisors meetings and was made sure that my voice was heard regardless of whether or not they were actually my district supervisors. So that's the first part. Over. Somebody.
This is Helia. So I believe the second part of the question was, can it be changed? Gabe, is that correct? So to my understanding, once the maps have been decided, they don't get changed until the next redistricting process happens in 10 years. So I think that's why there's so much that leads up to the process that we start. I think we should start earlier personally, but we take months and months of meetings and cartographers drawing up maps and doing, all this different statistical data and figuring out what makes the most sense. And in California, especially, we have a lot of rules around, minority populations being, represented, all kinds of different things. So it takes quite a bit of doing to make maps that fit all of the criteria. So once that's done and they are voted on and approved, they do not get changed until the next redistricting process, which will be in 2030, 2031. It'll be quite some time from now. So to my knowledge, that's how it works. If anyone else has anything to add.
Yeah, I know it's happened for this last process and will probably happen again in 10 years. You can go ahead, you yourself can just draw your own map as a way to provide your input. It's tricky, but that can help potentially influence the final one.
The only other way to change it is by going to court. If you have if you think that the lines were drawn unfairly and that they were intentionally used to block out a minority group's voice, then you can go to court and see if a judge will stop the redistricting. That's the only other way.
And I will say, because I was a part of an outreach team that did some informal discussions with different groups about what is the census, what does it mean, how does it impact, and we talked about that. Like it seems like it's, a lot of folks view it as a hassle, unnecessary, but this is why that process is in place, and this is how it impacts things. And so we stressed like the importance of being a part of that census process and making sure that folks are providing that feedback, because it does affect things later on down the road, and we're seeing now that that's what's happening. But so we have said thank you all for the information. We have a couple more questions in the chat. The first one is, and maybe Ben and Carrie and then Helia or whoever else, Colin, wants to chime in. But how does someone check into the voting records of your elected officials?
You can, in fact, just go to on the federal level, us.gov. On a state level, you can go to the state website. I think Dan might know better than me what it's actually now, but it used to be Ledge Info. And you can click on your legislature tour and you can view their voting record right there. And it will give you the past votes on what they've supported in the past and what they plan to support, whether it's been introduced. And sometimes you can just simply go to their website and they'll have their own record on legislation within the session and past sessions. So that's usually how I go about that.
Yeah, so I do basically what Ben says. Sometimes I'll head to their own websites because they tend to like to brag on the issues that they stand for. So it gives me an indication on their voting record by just their what they say about themselves and how they stand on the issues in general. But sometimes they'll say on their website something that's not true, and you really do need then to go and investigate their actual voting record. So yeah, it's the Ledge Info website that was just posted in the chat. That's a very good website.
Great.
Right.
Thank you.
Then, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Jim.
The next question we have is, do you think that your representative was thinking either a medical model or a behavioral model for IHSS workers?
This is Helia. I would be shocked if my representative was thinking about IHSS workers, period. But that's but to say that I was making a joke to say that most elected officials that I have come in contact with are not very well versed in IHSS. Some don't even really know what it is. And I have to provide education about in-home supportive services and what that program is, what the workers for that program get paid. I know several of us on this call, on this panel, are actively working on campaigns to increase the wages that in-home supportive services workers receive. So yeah, I don't know that a lot of thought is given to IHSS in general from many representatives, but hopefully someone else on the panel will have a different answer, but that's just my experience down in Orange County.
I
This
think
event-
maybe, oh, sorry. I
sorry,
think
go ahead.
I think the response on the chat was to what I had said about working with my legislator and how she was introducing training into the IHSS program, and she was going for a medical model. Yeah, she was pushing for a medical model, and unfortunately she would not back down. But luckily for us and the program, the legislation never got really off the ground. So, and that was due to a lot of advocacy throughout the state pushing back on that one area.
I was just going to add, that's why there's so much advocacy around home and community-based services at a federal level, and of course IHSS at a state level, because there is a historic institutional bias that disability advocates are constantly trying to confront and say that people with disabilities prefer home and community-based services so they can live in their communities, in their homes, get the care they need, but they can still lead fulfilled lives. So that's definitely one thing we provide constant education around when it comes to different legislatures, different laws, trying to get money that follows the person implemented, and doing everything we can to uphold home and community-based services.
I will also say too, one of the it may have been Carrie, or maybe you, Ben, brought up the importance of maybe bringing a packet of information whenever you're approaching an elected official about a specific program or issue or service, and like explaining, and it helps gives them some background, and really also makes you as the community advocate look better prepared in having this discussion and having this conversation with them. So you know, I mean, that's a really helpful tip to keep in mind too. So let me see if there's any other questions for folks who haven't typed a question in the chat, but have a question now, or maybe you've thought of something. Please feel free to unmute yourself at this point, and you can feel free to just ask your question live. So
Yeah, Thank you, Gabriel. Instead of unmuting, you'll have to raise your hand and then I will press allow you to talk and then you can ask. So we have Rick Hodgkins. I'll go ahead and allow you to talk and what you'll have to do is unmute yourself. All right, Rick, you have the floor. So just unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. First off, I just wanted to say I'm glad that that legislation.
Now unmuted.
I'm glad that that legislation died. So yay. Second, with regards to leginfo.ca.gov, I am very familiar with that website. I believe that the name of that website has changed, has it not? And my second follow-up question is, don't you have to have a password? Don't you have to sign up to use that website? So those are my questions. Thank
This is Helia. I can take that. So yes, it has actually changed. I just dropped that into, I'm going to go drop it into the chat. And while you do need to register to use it, I do believe that you can track up to 50 bills for free if you want to be able to track more than that, because they do offer a service where you can track a bill and see as it moves through the process to become a law. If you want to track more than that, you have to pay for it. But the first 50 to track, or just to be on there to look at vote record, all of that is all free, but you do have to sign up with an email to register for the website.
Okay, we do have one more question that came into the chat. So the question is, do you find that elected officials are familiar with legislation that addresses the needs of our community, or is a lot of your work education about how this community interacts with everything, education, personal support, finances, etc.? So we could just kind of do a round robin, whoever wants to take the question. So
I'll take it. I think it's about 50-50. Some people really know it, and it's shocking when you go in there and you're assuming they know nothing, and then they roll off all the details of all these legislations that are going through, and they know them all, and they're all supportive. But then you would find people that you expect that would know what we're all about, and you really have to take the basic steps to walk them through it because they don't know. So when I go in, I assume they know nothing, and then I sometimes am incredibly surprised. And when I find the people that really surprise me, I really try to build up even a greater relationship, because then the working relationship with them is a lot easier. I don't have to re-educate or anything like that. I can say, hey, look, we're supporting this and this is why. And right away, can we get your support? And usually they're like, oh yeah, I already signed on to that. I'm good. We're good to go. And then I'll work on something different with that individual, something maybe that is way off on the sideline, that other people haven't been able to push so much, but I can because I've got all this free time with this legislator. So yeah, it's a mixed bag. It's about 50-50. Sometimes you're pleasantly surprised, and other times you're like, wait, what happened here? I thought you knew.
Yeah, if I could just add to what Carrie said, I think that's why it is crucial to do your homework before you meet with the legislature. So you already have an idea of what they support, what they don't support. So you know where to emphasize the education. You know what to educate the legislature about. And if they know about an issue, as Carrie mentioned, you don't have to spend that much time on the topic. You might touch on it, thank them for their support, but also ask if they need any other information, which we touched on in a different segment. So it all kind of goes back to build that foundation with the researching who you're talking to, research what issues they know about and what issues they care about.
All right. I see no more questions in the chat. I'll do this as a last opportunity for anybody who wants to ask questions live. Please feel free to raise your hand.
I see a raised hand by Lisa.
Let me allow.
And now it's gone.
Lisa, you have the floor. So all you would have to do is unmute. Go ahead.
No, that was by accident. My apologies.
No worries. Thank you.
Okay, I think that, yeah, I don't see any more questions in the chat at this point. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of our panelists. Really, really good discussion, a lot of helpful information about the redistricting process. And I think it was helpful to have this sort of panel discussion to be able to give folks a little bit more perspective on personal experience in the redistricting process, and also some of the issues that tend to come up as the process moves along. So thank you again to everyone who attended today, and please tune in for our next discussion in a couple of weeks. We're looking forward to it. So thank you all again for joining us today.
I did want to say before we go, I learned so much from everybody today, from all of the presenters, and the rich discussion. It really brought up the importance of, even though the census and redistricting happens every 10 years, it's really an ongoing process of making sure that our communities are represented in the legislature and the legislative process. So thank you. And thank you everybody for taking the time to join us today.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I will go ahead and close the Zoom. There is a survey link that will be sent out to you after this Zoom closes. So if you would kindly take that, we would appreciate your feedback. And yeah, again, we will see you next month, and more information will come out for that. Again, thank you so much, everyone. Have a good day.